Let's talk about a man who never wrote a single word, but whose ideas fill thousands and thousands of books. A guy whose questions have literally shaped how we argue, how we learn, and how we search for truth for over 2,000 years. This is the story of Socrates. So, that's the big question, right? How on earth did a man who left no writings of his own become, the father of Western philosophy? Okay, let's dive in and really unpack the life and the mind of the man who taught the world to think just by asking questions. So our story starts in the bustling heart of ancient Athens. And you have to understand, this wasn't just any city. It was the cradle of democracy, of art, of some really radical new ideas. And right in the middle of it all was this strange, brilliant man who saw himself as the city's conscience. Socrates really lived through a golden but also super turbulent age for Athens. He was born around 470 BC, so he saw the absolute height of its power, but also the total devastation of the Peloponnesian War. He was even famous enough to be made fun of in a comedy play long before his infamous trial and execution. Now, you might be picturing some kind of stuffy ivory tower academic, but no. Socrates was the son of a stoneworker and a midwife. He lived in what was described as extreme poverty and was famously, unkept. But this same guy was a decorated war hero, known for his incredible bravery and endurance in battle. And he didn't have a school or some fancy academy. His classroom was the agora, the loud, crowded marketplace of Athens. He literally spent his days just talking to people, challenging the assumptions of anyone who'd listen, whether they were powerful politicians, celebrated poets, or just skilled craftsmen. A huge turning point in his life, or so the story goes from his student Plato, came from a divine source. Apparently, his friend journeyed to the most sacred site in Greece, the oracle at Delphi, and asked if anyone was wiser than Socrates. The oracle's answer? A clear and simple no. You can imagine Socrates was completely baffled. He was sure he wasn't wise, so he took the oracle's message as a kind of riddle and set out to find someone wiser than himself just to prove it wrong. But as he questioned Athens' most respected figures, he found the exact same thing over and over. They all pretended to know things they didn't actually know. And this brings us to his self-appointed mission. Socrates called himself a gadfly, like a horsefly, sent by the gods to sting the lazy horse of Athens. His constant, annoying questioning, it was all designed to wake the city up from its intellectual and moral sleep. He wasn't trying to win, he was trying to make people think. And all this relentless questioning wasn't just random. No, it was a powerful, systematic method for uncovering truth, a method that would, and I'm not exaggerating, change the world. See, unlike the other teachers of the day who claimed they were wise, Socrates' wisdom started with a really radical admission of ignorance. He realized that the very first step toward real knowledge is just recognizing the limits of what you actually know. And this is his greatest invention, the Socratic method. It's not about a teacher lecturing or just giving you answers. It's a shared journey of discovery. Through this really disciplined process of asking and answering questions, the whole point is to spark critical thinking and help people draw out the truth from inside themselves. So how does it actually work? Well, it basically starts with a big question about a huge concept, like what is justice? Then you just relentlessly pick apart the first easy answer you get, testing all its assumptions. The goal is to expose a contradiction, to force the other person to see that their definition doesn't hold up. The process ends, not with a perfect answer, but with a shared, I guess we don't know, which is the real start of wisdom. And I know, this might seem ancient, but its impact is absolutely everywhere today. The Socratic method is the foundation of law school, it's a cornerstone of cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's the very engine of scientific and philosophical inquiry. It is the DNA of critical thinking. But as you can probably guess, being a gadfly has its consequences. After decades of exposing the ignorance of the most powerful people in Athens, the city finally decided it had been stung one too many times, and this led to one of the most famous trials in all of history. His accusers were basically a coalition of the city's establishment. You had Anytus for the politicians, Meletus for the poets, and Lycon for the public speakers, all groups whose claims to wisdom Socrates had publicly and repeatedly taken apart. This wasn't just a legal fight, it was a total clash of worldviews. So the official charges were twofold. First, corrupting the youth, which basically meant teaching them to think for themselves instead of blindly following tradition. And second, impiety, for not believing in the state gods and introducing new spiritual concepts, which was probably a nod to the divine inner voice he claimed to have. Now, instead of giving a traditional defense, Socrates did what he always did. He started asking questions. In this brilliant moment, he cross-examined his main accuser, Mentis, and just led him right into a logical trap, getting him to claim that Socrates was an atheist who also believed in demigods. It was pure Socrates. But his defense wasn't really about legal tricks. It was a defense of his entire life's purpose. He basically argued that a life without philosophical inquiry, a life without constantly questioning yourself and the world around you, well, it's not a life worth living for a human being. He made it clear he would rather die than stop thinking. And the jury of his fellow Athenians found him guilty. Even then, his friends arranged an escape plan, but Socrates refused to go. He argued that he'd lived his whole life under the city's laws, and to run away now would be to betray his own principles. So he accepted the sentence, gathered his students around him, and calmly drank the cup of poison hemlock. So Socrates the man was gone, but his death turned him into a martyr for philosophy, and his ideas were just beginning their journey through history. And here's the most fascinating irony of all. We only know about the man who wrote nothing because his most brilliant student, Plato, made him the hero in dozens of his philosophical dialogues. It's through Plato's writing that Socrates' voice was saved from being lost to history forever. And the chain of influence is just incredible. Socrates taught Plato, who then taught Aristotle. That trio right there, that's the very foundation of Western philosophy. His focus on ethics and virtue influenced countless schools of thought, and his life remains the ultimate symbol of sticking to your principles no matter the cost. When you boil it all down, Socrates' greatest lesson wasn't an answer to a question. It was the question itself. He taught us that knowledge isn't some package you just receive from a teacher. It's a difficult, sometimes painful, but ultimately rewarding process of discovery that you have to undertake for yourself. In the end, his entire world-changing philosophy, the method, the trial, the legacy, it can all be traced back to the incredible power of asking one simple three-letter word, a word that challenges authority, that dismantles ignorance, and that begins every single search for the truth. Why?